So, welcome to how to navigate a custody battle with a narcissist. This is moms helping moms to have hope. Hi, I'm Grace Wroldson, author, and I have a guest here, Veronica York. She's an expert, and we'll get into some introductions. But our question today is how to have hope as you're navigating a custody battle or co-parent forced to co-parent with a narcissist in a high conflict custody battle. How do you hold your head above water? How do you navigate this? How do you have hope? And that's what we're going to share today. So I'll just do a brief introduction. So, hi, I'm Grace. I'm a mother, thriver, certified life coach, and an author of several self help books for women and mothers on Amazon. I always say, if you're ready to learn, I'm ready to teach. I help motivated mothers who are forced to co parent with a narcissist maintain their sanity, number one, save their custody cases, and enjoy their children's one and only childhood. I'm an author that offers my tips, tools, strategies, my success stories for you to glean wisdom from and reflect on and maybe learn from. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer, but a mom, thriver. And the only legal advice I give is to get legal advice. My words of wisdoms, tips, insights are based on my thoughts, experiences, and opinions, and my books, videos, and webinars are not a proper tool for any needed therapy. I'm not a mental health professional. So if you need therapeutic support, please call your local support agencies to get a licensed professional to help you that is safe and confidential. Better yet, get a narcissist recovery expert. I also like to say how I write for moms who are forced to co-parent with narcissists or stuck in high conflict custody battles is if this is you, you are not alone. My books can validate what you may be experiencing and give you creative ways to improve your co-parenting conditions. And I include all my tips, tools, and strategies for moms to grab onto in my books. Some of them just grab onto my books like a life raft. I aim to be a light in the darkness of this dilemma. And I believe there are healthy attitudes we can adopt, mindsets we can make solid, and sanity to hold on to, as well as some beneficial perspectives that we can take that really help us endure it and survive if you're in a custody battle. There are many resources out there that you may not know of, which is why I have a special guest on today. I want you to learn all you can because knowledge is power. And I say be prepared with survivor wisdom. I read 20 something books from moms going through the same thing before I wrote mine. My goal is to leave you with tidbits of wisdom and lots of encouragement and know that you can endure this and be resilient. Believe in yourself and remember to learn the valuable lessons in this and come out smarter and stronger than before. So, I always suggest that moms read my books in the order written. Previously, I wrote books for loving an alcoholic and leaving my codependency, love addiction, and trauma bonds behind. And now I write for moms. And my first book is Co Parenting with a Narcissist, 7 Self Rules to Stay Sane. Second book's How to Fight a Narcissist in Family Court and Win. My third is Co Parenting with a Sociopath, Survival and Sanity Guide. And my fourth newest book is How to Survive a Custody Battle with a Narcissist When the Family Courts Force You to Co Parent. So, read, learn, reflect, heal, and grow. I encourage you to learn my skillful means method and gray walling techniques in my newest blogs and books. And I would like to introduce Veronica. Let me go back a few slides. So, is it okay if I give an introduction? Read one from your website, or do you want to introduce yourself?
Either way is fine. If you want to go ahead and introduce or read something, that's fine. Just want to say thank you for having me and glad to be here. And everything you just said is wonderful and just glad to be a part of helping all of these moms.
Great. Well, I'm so glad to have found you. You're like, a gem and a diamond in this this mess that we are in. I have your Your bio here, it's just a short one, as a high conflict divorce coach and domestic violence and child abuse custody expert. So, after a 20-year sales and marketing career in the television industry, Veronica York felt a passion and calling to make a career change. Due to her own experience with a high conflict, quote unquote, custody battle, she realized that the best interest of children was not the priority in the family court system. She realized that children are suffering unnecessarily due to outdated practices of judges, lawyers, evaluators, and other court professionals. And Veronica became a certified high conflict divorce coach and started her coaching practice. In addition to helping her clients navigate the custody battles, she has partnered with an expert, Barry Goldstein. He's a leading expert witness in contested custody cases involving domestic violence and child abuse. Barry and Veronica work together to educate the court professionals by exposing them to current scientific research such as the ACE and Saunders studies. This research strongly supports protective mothers' cases and encourages reform of practices that work poorly for children. So, those are my introductions. And Veronica and I talked recently, and these were the questions that we came up with. How do you hold on to hope? How do you keep your head above water? How do you navigate this mess when they push shared parenting and 50-50 on both parents, or when the court battles are the way the abuser abuses you as a mom. So she was talking to me about how the research is key and that we want to change the discussion from what can the mom and the children do to accommodate the abuser and being lumped in as high conflict, which is like a hang up, to what about the health and safety of the child or the children. So thank you. Welcome, Veronica. Like, where should we start? What's been happening out there? You are a witness, expert witness. You are like what I consider on the front lines of family court, trying to help while some of us like me are on the front lines of family court still doing battle. What's been coming up with your clients? What's the most pressing issue? I see that this family court failures is like a national crisis that we're in.
It is. It's national, it's international. And I think that over the underlying issues are really about the court systems not understanding the dynamics of domestic violence and child abuse when you're looking at contested custody cases, because the context here is that majority of cases are handled more or less amicably. So custody courts are used to maybe two reasonable parents who are having some issues and ultimately can work it out. But the problem is about 3.8% of all custody cases, and that's not a very big percent, but 3.8% are 75 to 90% of those cases are really domestic violence and child abuse. And what's happening is they're trying to impose these high conflict approaches in these cases, and it doesn't work because all of these high conflict approaches, like having a guardian ad litem, using custody evaluations, getting a co-parenting evaluator, all of these things are pushing a co-parenting relationship when the Saunders study has found that co-parenting is never appropriate in a domestic violence case. What they're doing is creating a very uh, a false equivalency between an abuser and a victim. And when we're looking at things like shared parenting, you're really giving all of the power to the abuser. So, what we need is a more multidisciplinary approach, a comprehensive approach that includes domestic violence experts who can come in and talk about the research and educate the courts about how these approaches are really working poorly for children. And we need this to change. Again, like you said, it's changing that discussion because right now they're forcing the shared parenting. And what we want is for the courts to understand that the mother and children can't be looked at as the problem and the ones that are creating this problem. We need to ask the fathers, what can you do to reduce the fear and stress on the child and the mother that they depend on, because that's what the ACE research tells us, is that domestic violence is not any immediate physical injury that's causing the harm. It's really the stress and fear that abusers cause.
That is such a powerful thing that I learned, and I think I learned that in, one of the, things that Barry wrote. You and Barry wrote an article, let me see if I can find that, that talks about it. Um, it's the fear and the stress, and many of the moms that I have in my private groups, they, this is the one. This is the article that talks about how the fear and stress, and this can be found, I think, right through your website under resources. So,
Yes.
this is the family courts need domestic violence experts for sure. And the 20 common mistakes in evaluations judges miss. It's the fear and the stress. So many of the moms that are co-parent, forced to co-parent with a narcissist, which is their former abuser and a personality disordered person,
Mhm.
um, have so much fear and stress. They're forced to co-parent with them and try to share 50-50 parenting time. And then, they're stuck in a high conflict custody battle because they want to protect their children from narcissistic abuse and other things that the abuser might be doing, which is like putting the child at risk, neglect, um, doing drugs or drinking around the child. So, yeah, we need some family court reform for sure, and they need to be required to be educated on this to look for the patterns. And that's what I learned from Barry and from you. There's patterns that they have, and you can document these patterns and show the pattern of behavior towards the mother and the children. And that's what I encourage moms to do, is to get a documentation system to highlight the patterns of behavior versus calling them a narcissist or pointing the finger, and then being lumped in as high conflict. So you and I talked about how when they say it's a high conflict custody case, they often lump the mom in, but it only takes one person to create this high conflict situation. Am I right?
Absolutely. And we know abusers are highly manipulative, so they are very good at turning things around and using their behaviors to blame the mother for what they're actually doing. And so one of the things that we do when we work with clients as experts is we screen for domestic violence. And that is what about in this article is about, this 20 mistakes that evaluators make, is because evaluators, the Saunders study was a study done in the National Institute of Justice in the US Justice Department. It was done to assess the domestic violence knowledge of judges, lawyers, and particularly evaluators, because judges and lawyers get a lot of their information and too often misinformation from evaluators. Now, mental health professionals absolutely have a place in custody cases if there is mental illness. However, they are not typically trained adequately, have the expertise or knowledge in domestic violence that's needed. So they're not doing any effective screening for domestic violence. In fact, the mistakes that they're making are really all favoring abusive fathers. So the Saunders study says that we need to do four things to screen for domestic violence. The first thing is to not use non-probative factors to disbelieve true reports of abuse. So some common examples would be if a mother left the relationship and then returned, if she filed for a protective order and didn't follow through, she doesn't have any medical reports, she doesn't have any police reports. A professional might observe the children with the father and the children don't show fear. And the professional might say, oh, okay, well, there can't be any abuse because the children aren't afraid of the father. Well, really, that's more probative that there's no alienation. But what they don't understand is that children understand that they can still play with a father they still love in front of witnesses, and he's not going to hurt them. And then the last example would be that they would take up a father's public behavior as if it's probative to his private behavior. And victims understand, and domestic violence 101 tells you that public behavior is very different than private behavior with abusers. So, those are common examples of factors and situations that courts usually look at to determine or to disbelieve true reports of abuse. The second thing we want to do is we want to ask the question, who is afraid of who? Because that really tells us that the courts are creating that false equivalency between an abuser and a victim. Parenting can't happen, co parenting can't happen if one parent is afraid of the other. And then the third part is looking at the motives of the father. So there are a lot of things that fathers are doing, abusive fathers, that show their motives are really about regaining control and punishing the mother for leaving the relationship. Courts want to assume that fathers are acting out of love for their children in custody courts if they're seeking custody. But if they can look at their behaviors, a lot of times their behaviors will show what their true motives are. And you hit the nail on the head. The last part is what we call the pattern of abuse. And the pattern of abuse is a document that lists all of the tactics that the abusive father used both during the relationship and then also since separation. It's not a list of incidents, but of those coercive, controlling things that he does to create that stress and fear, to punish the mother for not obeying, because they believe they're entitled to make all the decisions. So they'll use things like verbal abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, spiritual abuse, financial abuse, and the list goes on. But those are tactics that they use. And you're right, the tactics are similar. And the cases across the country, and across the world, really, abusive tactics tend to be pretty similar. And we look at those tactics to show what his motives are. We can look at that for risk assessment because a lot of times tactics are used that are associated with a higher risk of lethality, and that's very helpful to show the court. Things like harming animals or harming a woman while pregnant, access to weapons, forced or pressured sex. Those things are associated with a higher risk of lethality. So we'll look at that and we will be able to show the court not only does he have these tactics, but he hasn't changed because a very common misconception is that the abuse ends when the relationship ends. And we all know that that's not the case. And so we want to show the court he hasn't changed. The only thing that research shows that can change an abuser's behavior is accountability and monitoring. And that's the key. If we don't have the accountability and monitoring, which most courts do not place on an abusive father, the abuse will continue, the behavior doesn't change, and the children are not able to heal, and they continue to be exposed to that stress and fear that the ACE study says is so harmful. So that was a really long explanation for that, but I
I'm
wanted to
really
get that out there.
really I'm really glad you fleshed it out, you explained it because it is a misconception that the abuse ends when the relationship ends. Actually, it's called post-separation abuse. The
That's
the
right.
the personality disordered person is still the problem, and so, like, for when moms are co-parenting with narcissists, they want order and they want things to be civil, but I always say you can't get order from a personality disordered person. So you've got to expect there's going to be some disorder and bad communication, no communication, miscommunications, everything that somebody with a personality disorder has problems with. And I'm glad you talked about the accountability, the monitoring, and the consequences. Because when I first talked to Barry years ago, he said you need those three things. I said, how do I make this abuse, which I call co-parenting abuse? And I write about it, and I list all those tactics that I endured. I made a whole list. It's like it's on a picture of an iceberg where you can see like physical abuse, but then
Mhm.
everything below it, like manipulating the children and giving you the wrong information, the date and time of the doctor, all the different things that they can do, flying monkeys, minions, all those tactics of an abuser, which I call, in my situation, as a narcissist, um, needs to be understood as this is post separation abuse. This is a person abusing the other co parent, which I call co parenting abuse, which is not a recognized term. So accountability, monitoring, consequences, what did that mean in my situation? And it meant that we had to stay under the microscope of the family court. I had to back into the family court, which cost so much in legal fees. Family court is so stressful on its own. It's not a straight line to the judge where you just tell the truth and everyone gets it. It like you said, like in person, he seems charming and reasonable and cares about his kid, but behind the scenes that is not what we get. Even my child said, "Daddy when we're in front of other people is not the same person when we're not in front of other people," and she
Mhm.
called it out very clearly when she was little, and
Yep.
for the protection of all involved, my daughter, my ex, and myself, I write and speak in a pen name, and I can that way I can share the details that moms can relate to of having to deal with the tactics of an abuser. And I don't think I understood that the narcissist was an abuser. I got that there was narcissistic abuse syndrome, and I was probably suffering from that. But I didn't understand that he was an abuser, and that showing up into the doctor's office and then talking about how many guns he has. We hadn't been together, and the doctor would look at him and say, well, are they locked up? Like, what's the point of talking about your guns in a, family doctor's office visit for, immune vaccinations?
Mhm.
There were just so many ways to put I was totally afraid of him, and I still am because I don't think he's right in the head. I'm not sure what he will do next, and that
Mhm.
is fear and stress of what will he do next. I mean, my tires have been slashed. There's been a lot of different things of sabotage that I've endured, and I'm just, like you said, like, they want control. They want to regain control. I've found ways to survive, to just let him feel like he's got control, because then he doesn't have to push more abuse on us, me, or retaliate on our child if he just feels in control. So
Mhm.
I've had to work on 2 fronts. One is placating and appeasing and being so nice to him, and the other is have a good high-powered lawyer who is using accessing the family courts and doing not just a defensive strategy. That was my first mistake, was being on the
Mhm.
defense of
Yes.
all his motions, and feeling attacked and defending and justifying and over explaining, hoping that he would get it, but not understanding he was determined to misunderstand me. It was all a way to emotionally destabilize me to win. So
Mhm.
I have a new offensive strategy, which is, well, what matters to him? Because we got to threaten that narcissistic supply a little bit, and we have to use the legal system like he is, to actually counter some of it and survive. So my case, just so the moms know, I think I might have a little slide for some of it. My case, the family courts failed me, although they gave me back some of my rights. They helped me in the beginning to stay safe. The judge issued transfers at the YMCA, child support, which my ex was never going to give me. And the GAL failed me when he hired a GAL, which I called a hit woman. She just came after me with a
Mhm.
purpose. And that was a fail. But then I went on to learn what I call skillful means, which is, all right, how do I navigate this? And not, like I said, I did not realize the narcissist was abusing me using post separation abuse tactics. I didn't even know what coercive control was. I
Mhm.
wasn't a DV expert, but then I did get a DV counselor because I was being legally abused more than I was abused in the relationship. When I felt sorry for him, I gave him the benefit of the doubt.
Mhm.
So I was getting more abused outside of the relationship than I was inside of the relationship in my case. And it was my second attorney who said, I said, why isn't my case resolving? And he said, well, it's because your ex is a narcissist. And I went, "What?" I mean, I
Mm.
don't have a psychology degree. I had to go look that up, and it looked like he was like a covert narcissist, and
Mhm.
I just knew he had a drinking problem that he wouldn't admit to, and and he would always say, "Well, I don't have a drinking problem, you just have a problem with my drinking." He would always twist things in my mind. So I lost some in family court. I won some in family court. I'm still in family court, and I have to keep it there because he will try to get away with all kinds of things. So I've had to use the family court for the accountability, monitoring, and consequences, and family court doesn't get it. They don't get it. They ordered us into co-parenting therapy, which I was so afraid to do. It was such an abusive thing. I endured 7 months of that. I had to do all this research on how to handle being in there. I mean, the therapist couldn't even referee him. Like, she had to talk to him like he was a toddler to say that you can't say this and you can't do that. And there were so
Mhm.
many four-way meetings with attorneys where he's like, "I'm gonna make you get rid of the no trespassing order." And his attorney had to like sit him down and say, "You can't do that. We can't do
Mhm.
that." So he's entitled. He can't see around any corners. He can't see long term. If he was a reasonable person who thought long term, maybe, spending over 400,000 in legal fees to beat up on an ex may not be the best use of his money, and he could find something else to do and move on. So I was able to get a second attorney, have a offensive strategy, not a defensive strategy. Focus on just being a good mom and change some of the situation where I got the abuse to stop, but I worked with like a DV counselor, a therapist, a social worker, and all kinds of experts of how do I make this abuse stop? And like you said, it's accountability, monitoring, and consequences. And I so badly would love to be out of family court, but it's the only place that I could ever hold him accountable. It's the only place that I could actually fight him because I can't do the fighting with him. It has to be lawyer to lawyer, and that seems to be the healthiest way to go in my situation. But I get that everybody's situation is different. And so at one point I wanted to bring Barry on and you on as expert witnesses to educate our judge. And that's what you do. So you have a practice where you're a coach and you write these articles and you work, um, and you come in as an expert. You help moms understand what's happening to them, or fathers. I know there's fathers out there this happens to them too. And you come on the stand as an expert with your report and try to show the judge this is a pattern of behavior, and there's two studies, that Ace and Saunders study, that really show you that this will be affecting the children if you put them in the hands of the abuser and take them away from the protective parent, if you don't get who's trying to abuse who, and
Mhm.
why the mom would even want to protect the child from the other parent or limit the time. So that's what you do, right? You will fly around the country, you work in the US, and maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. I do have two separate businesses. I have my coaching business where I coach moms. And like you said, the majority of our work is going to be with protective mothers because, domestic violence is a gendered crime. Back in the 1970s, when there was no research regarding domestic violence, the first law that we know of domestic violence today was that husbands cannot beat their wives on Sunday. So
Wow.
domestic violence has not always been a crime like murder or arson. This is something that over time we've learned that husbands have been encouraged, and it's accepted for them to have this power and control over their wives. And so even though the laws are now changed, this mentality is still ingrained in a lot of men who believe that they are entitled, like you said. And so we're having to overcome that. We do work with Ace and Saunders, but we also have research, so we talk about regarding primary attachment, regarding shared parenting, regarding gender bias in the courts. So there's a lot of things that we want to talk about and educate the courts on. So I have my coaching business where I work with mothers to help strategize, document, and communicate is the big one, with not only their ex, but with the professionals in their case as well. and then I have the separate business where I'm a partner with Barry Goldstein, and we do expert witness work across the country. I just started doing expert witness this year, so I've just started, but Barry's been qualified in 30 states as an expert witness. I've been qualified in 2 so far, and that's growing every day. But we do come in and we try to educate the court on how their current court practices are really working poorly for children in these cases. And the problem is that these court professionals have heard their entire careers that children do better with both parents in their lives. And that's true, but only when both parents are safe parents. When one parent is an abuser, then that's not true. And so that's why we really talk about primary attachment. Primary attachment is not a controversial issue so much. It's minimized. The significance of that is missed in child custody cases, especially in so much that a lot of fathers' rights groups have gone around imposing a shared parenting or 50-50 presumption in a lot of states. And that's where we run into issues. Because when we talk about primary attachment, the definition is the parent who did the majority of the child care in the first 2 years of a child's life is the primary attachment figure and will always be the primary attachment figure. And children need their primary attachment figure more than the other parent. They also need their safe parent more than the abusive one. So we really want to make sure that courts aren't minimizing that when they're looking at custody cases. And when we look at shared parenting, there's good research that says that 50-50 physical custody is not good in any situation because it's so disruptive for children's lives. There is also legitimate research that says that shared parenting can be acceptable, but there are 4 things that need to be there in order for it to work. Number 1, both parents would need to want to co-parent. Number 2, neither can be afraid of the other. Number 3, they need to be able to communicate effectively. And number 4, they need to live nearby each other. And we both know that that is not the cases that we deal with. And so the goal in these cases should be parallel parenting. And parallel parenting is where you really limit the communication between the parents as much as physically possible through parenting apps. The only communication should be about the children, and it should only be specific details. The parenting plan should be written very detailed and specifically so there's no gray areas. There shouldn't be any back and forth. There should not be any alternatives to the parenting plan, meaning switching days and things like that. That should all be kept at a minimum. Parallel parenting is really the goal in these cases. And when we talk about accountability and monitoring consequences, you're absolutely right, because the only thing that's going to change the behavior of an abuser is if he feels that his behaviors are hurting his case. That is
Yeah.
the only time that he's going to feel like he needs to change or that his tactics aren't working, because you're right. If they feel like they're not winning, it's not fun for them and they'll back off.
Right. I told my lawyer that, who didn't get it, even though my second lawyer was a top family law attorney. I said, look, if you make him pay my legal fees once for any contempts, he won't do this again. He'll stop interfering with the court ordered parent child phone calls at 6 p.m.
Mhm.
If you just make him pay my legal fees once, and guess what? He had to pay my legal fees once, be held in contempt, and he stopped the nonsense. And
Mhm.
but he didn't learn, "Oh, I should just be a better person or a better co-parent." He
Right.
learned, "Oh, I gotta get a different lawyer," and that's what he did. He switched lawyers too. So, many of us moms are on our umpteenth a lawyer,
Mhm.
um, and I'm on my 3rd, he's on his 3rd, because we've been in the court battle for over a decade, and it's obvious that's where it has to stay. Otherwise, like you said, there's really no healthy co-parenting with a personality disordered person.
Mhm.
And you have to do parallel parenting, which is you do your own thing, he does his own thing, you follow the court order,
Mhm.
and you do what the order says. I talk about co-parenting and getting peace, meaning we learn to speak in a way that de-escalates and neutralizes things and disarms them so that we are not battling them personally. The battle
Mhm.
stays where it has to, which is between the lawyers asserting or requesting rights,
Right.
as our constitutional right to, petition the courts if we need something, if something's not working, or we need to file something or file a counter back to something else. So if you look at my case, he's only requested a reduction of child support. He was never requesting more time. And at some point, the judge said, "Sir, why are you here? Because you're not asking for more time with your child. Why are you filing? Why do you keep coming here?" So, it was legal abuse that he was doing to me. And
Mhm.
once he heard that, he had to start asking for more time with our child, which he didn't want. He was just
Mhm.
holding her hostage is what she says. He's holding me hostage and isolating her. And
Mhm.
like you said, I was the primary. He didn't want any of the work involved in changing diapers on a colicky baby with, like, delays or food intolerances. He didn't want that. He just wanted to look good to his family that he produced a child. And she became like one of the supply, which is, look at me, look at what I can do. Even though he didn't do it, I did all the work. He
Mhm.
could show her off, and that was his motive, was looking good to his family. He just didn't
Mhm.
wanna pay, and he didn't want any of the work. And so I did all that work, and when he got 50-50, when he won that, he had no intention of parenting. He just dropped her off to his mom and made her go do chores. Now she's like his housekeeper slave, and now I'm like his emergency babysitter, which is how I've decided to play my cards, because it gives me like 80% time with her and him
Mhm.
20% time. And because when it was first ordered 50-50, I'd get the calls of her crying, and he put a stop to all the calls because he
Mhm.
didn't want evidence out there. He just wanted to silence everybody. So he didn't want evidence that our child was struggling, missing me. That hurt his ego, his fragile ego. And I did learn through all this that he's more scared of me. He's a scared person. He's disordered and he's scared. Even though I'm afraid of him and what he will do and retaliate and how he will act, because he does seek revenge, and he does uh get hung up on anything that seems unfair to him. He gets hung up on that, and he doesn't just back down and walk away and cut his losses. He finds a way to fight. And I'm I go into fear and he goes into fight, and I just want to flee, but I don't want to leave my child behind. So I know moms have all different situations and stories, but some of this stuff is very eerily similar. And I'm sure when you hear a client, it's like, oh, you can already tell he's the abuser just based on a couple things, because man, these cases
Mhm.
are really similar, right?
Yes, very similar. And you wouldn't believe, well, I guess you would believe that the similarities when we go to the battered mothers custody conference, and inevitably the great thing about that conference is that a lot of mothers get to talk to each other, and all these mothers are very easy to admire. They're great women, and they all talk about their stories, and we just say, hey, we I guess we were all married to the same man because it's all so similar. And yeah, that thing about afraid, yeah, yes, the abuser is afraid that he'll get caught. He's
Yes.
afraid that he's not going to win. He's afraid, and we all know narcissists who they are. Inside, they are insecure little boys who stopped growing emotionally at some point in their childhood, and they are the most insecure people on this earth. And what terrifies them the most is that anybody is going to see that side of them. And that's what they're afraid of. But when we talk about afraid, they're not afraid you're going to beat them up or shoot them or end their life. When we talk about domestic violence, these are victims, these are women who are afraid for their lives, they're afraid for their children's lives, and they go to court believing that the justice system is going to help them and
Right.
that they're going to be able to see the truth. And time again, that's not the case. And they're blindsided by the contempt that they're given, the just the gender bias. When we talk about gender bias in courts, there were 40 states that had committees, court sponsored committees that did studies on gender bias, and all 40 states found widespread gender bias in child custody cases. And the most common examples were giving the mother less credibility, holding the mother to a higher standard of proof, and blaming the mother for the actions of the abuser. And that happens pretty much in all the cases that we work on. It's
Wow.
unbelievable.
Yeah, it's backwards and it needs to be people say the family court is broken. I say, well, yes, it's inadequate, it's inept, it's uneducated, it's not capable of handling these cases. So there needs to be a different route for these cases that have experts with some type of pattern or some type of stops along the way. For example, I left my ex who was drinking all the time for his drinking and driving. And so when we got to court and they were going to establish, visitation, there should have been a pathway. If there's alcohol concerns or issues, there should have been a track that we went on because who would give a baby to a drunk driver to
Mhm.
take him on a visit by himself and he's not even conscious, he's under the influence and he's breaking the law and it's not safe for the baby to be in the vehicle. So there should have been a track for that, or I didn't even know I was being abused because I didn't know what gaslighting was at the time, but I did once I realized I was being legally abused. And I got a DV counselor who came to my trials, and we were in and out of court so many times per year. And I was so afraid to even see him because he was so argumentative at transfers. There was a period of time where I did this, I just was silent at transfers, handing him a co parenting note about the baby. And then the supervised child transfers through the YMCA were installed. So I didn't have to see him. There was a middle person blocking our contact, which was wonderful because I was
Mhm.
afraid of him. And so when I'd have to see him in court, my counselor would come with me and just sit and watch. And she was appalled. She was appalled how they didn't get it. They just
Mhm.
give more and more rights to this complaining dad where we can all feel sorry for him that he doesn't have the family and the wife and access to the kids, and poor him, poor him. He's got to pay child support to an ex, which infuriates most narcissists and
Yes.
abusers. And so many moms, including me, just want to give the child support back to them and say, leave us alone. This is all
Yes.
you want, your money. Keep it. Just leave
Yes.
us alone. And we can't say that because that that can come back to haunt us in court like some type of bribe or something. So we can't say it that way. We can make offers and things through our lawyers. We have to, listen to our lawyers who know the full history, who know the judge, and and too much power is given to the judge in these cases. And I really think
Yes.
there should be, well, let's see. Okay, there's a concerns of alcohol or drug use, and both parties. This is my idea of a solution. Let's just drug and alcohol test these people for the next 1 to 3 months, and if whoever fails is probably the one with the problem, let's just stop right there. And I really think that needs to be done because if they did that in my case, he wouldn't have kept winning, winning, and then losing, losing, losing. he would have been like, "Oh, you're disqualified. You're disqualified from driving this child in the car because you failed all 3 alcohol tests in this past 3 months." That would have solved the family court. That would have helped the judge make an informed decision that is
Mhm.
based on fact, where, you see the mom tests negative, the dad's testing positive. So we know who to believe now because one of them's lying,
Yep.
because he's always turning the story. One of the things a narcissist does will turn the story and accuse you of what they're doing, which is so infuriating for moms and emotionally taxing and upsetting and destabilizing, even to be falsely accused. And
Yes.
especially while some of these fathers are like sexually abusing the children, neglecting the children, physically assaulting the children, and there's all kinds of documentation. And because moms, like you said, there's some sort of bias. Well, if a mom makes a false report, that's a false report because moms say that to win. And it's like, nope, nope, it's not it. I just want my child safe, please. But maybe you could talk about that. Moms are very few of us make false reports.
Absolutely. And we tell a story just to kind of for the context here, and then I'll go into some of the research about that. But the story we like to tell is that a mother was in the kitchen washing dishes, looking through the window at her son playing outside in the backyard. She looks up and a mountain lion has come into the backyard and started to attack her son. She runs outside, punches the mountain lion, grabs her son and runs back inside. Now the courts would say the mother was alienating the lion. And so we like to say, it's a mother's natural instinct to protect their child. They're not having fun in family court.
No.
This is not fun for them to go into court and have all of the stress and fear on them and the child. If they had a father who was loving and kind and did put the child's needs first, there would be no issues. So we really need to look at it in that context. And what's happening is that when the courts are not using the research like ACE, adverse childhood experiences, because without ACE, they're minimizing the impact of domestic violence on children. They're not using the Saunders study. Without the Saunders study, they're relying on the wrong professionals. They're using high conflict approaches that these professionals don't understand. They are making recommendations and decisions that are based upon the myth that mothers frequently make false reports and on unscientific alienation theories. And because of that, the recommendations and decisions are harming these children. And there is a study called the Bala study, which the Saunders study cites quite frequently. And the Bala study found that mothers in contested custody cases only make deliberate false reports less than 2% of the time. And in contrast, fathers who are involved in child custody cases are 16 times more likely to make deliberate false reports, and even more so false denials. And when you look at that, it seems off because we're not saying that, men are 16 times less honest than women, because Bala is only looking at mothers and fathers who are involved in contested custody. And those are the numbers that the outcome was. And that just goes to show that courts are getting it wrong the majority of the time in these cases because they do believe that myth that mothers frequently make false reports. And that's just not the case. And you brought it up about child sexual abuse. The ACE research shows that we allow a quarter of our children in the United States to be sexually abused. And that's astounding. And the reason for that is because there's a very vast difference between how the response to child sexual abuse is done if the perpetrator is a stranger versus if the perpetrator is somebody that the child knows. And unfortunately, most child sexual abuse is done by someone that the child knows. And it could be, a father, a stepfather, an uncle, someone like that.
Yep.
But when it's a stranger, there's a very different approach. The law enforcement gets involved. The goal is to quickly interview the perpetrator, to do a lie detector test, to put him in jail, to convict him. There is a good investigation done, etc. But when the perpetrator is someone the child knows, the case is handled by a social worker. The the goal is really reunification. They don't do a thorough job in investigating. They give the perpetrator time to silence the child.
Yeah.
They and then when they don't do a very good investigation and then they close the case, whether it's unsubstantiated or unfounded, then the custody courts look at that as automatically that the mother is coaching. And the problem with that is that, there are many likely explanations when a mother would allege child sexual abuse. And the problem is that when courts look at that, they're only looking at two possible explanations. Either the abuse is true or that the mother is coaching. But they fail to look at all the other likely possibilities because, as we know, abuse is done in private for obvious reasons. So there's no class in high school that tells mothers how to deal with this sort of thing. And when they see the child, they have to go by either what the child is saying. Oftentimes, a child is so young they're not talking yet, or they have very limited vocabulary, and and they have to go by the child's behaviors, what the child is saying, things that might be concerning in a physical situation. And so, other likely explanations could be, the most likely explanation is that the child was sexually abused, but it could be that the child was exposed to pornography, the child was exposed to some kind of sex act, there was a boundary violation of some sort. It could have been a good faith report that just came back not to be true. So there are so many other likely explanations than just if the case is closed, which is a very high um, majority of cases because social workers and caseworkers, number one, they don't have the correct training in child sexual abuse. It's a very, very specialized area of knowledge. And when they don't have, it's a very high level of proof in order to substantiate something like that. So when they don't have, number one, the expertise to understand how to investigate this properly, then they close the case. The judge and the court automatically goes to, well, the mother was coaching. And
Right.
that's extremely dangerous because the Meyer study done by Joan Meyer, she's a law professor at George Washington University. She did an outcome study in cases that involve child sexual abuse, and that includes the perpetrator alleging parental alienation. And what she found is that when these parental alienation cases are being they're being done in a very gender biased manner. So meaning when a father is found to be alienating a child, it really doesn't have any impact on the case. But if a mother is found to be alienating a child and the father is alleging parental alienation, it has a profound effect on the case. In fact, they're switching custody. They're giving custody over to the abusive father, and the protective mother is losing custody. And that is extremely obviously problematic because there are so many cases that we deal with right now where an alleged abuser is claiming alienation and mothers are losing custody of their children.
Yes, that is sad fact. I've run into that as a coach and a strategy partner with moms That's what I hear happening, and that's why I'm always like, "You need to safeguard your case against parental alienation claims," whether parental alienation is junk science debunked or whatever, you still need to think that that's the way fathers are winning right now in the United States in family court with that claim. So we need to safeguard the case as best we can from that because what did you call it? Was it the worst case outcome or worst outcome cases? It's one of the
Yes.
studies. Which one
Yeah,
is that?
The Saunders study has a section called harmful outcome cases. And harmful outcome cases are when a protective mother is, um, or I'm sorry, when a alleged abuser is given custody, sole custody, and a protective mother is limited to either supervised visits or no contact, who is the primary attachment figure. And Saunders said that this is always wrong. And scientific studies don't use a word like always very frequently, but it is always wrong because these decisions are extreme decisions that are based on flawed practices, and any benefit the court believes that it's doing by doing that is completely outweighed by the harm that it's causing these children who are taken away from their primary attachment figure and given over to alleged abusers. And of course, there's this whole cottage industry of professionals who use parental alienation and reunification camps to basically brainwash these children. And it's threat therapy is what the kids call it. And it's I don't even understand how it's legal in this country, to be honest. It's extremely alarming. But yeah, the Saunders study mentions it as harmful outcome cases, and there unfortunately is a big cottage industry of professionals who make a lot of money in doing this threat reunification therapy.
Yeah. Threat therapy. I've not heard that term yet. I've heard a lot of crazy things. I live in a free country. This is, the year 2024 and some backward stuff is still happening in family court that I'm like,
Mm.
aren't we over this? I mean, we live in a free country. I can do anything else I want as a mom, but I can't do raise my child? Wait a minute. Like what is going
Yeah,
on here? And
yeah.
I ended up finding other moms writing books and read their books and said, I'll write some of my story down, which is helpful. So, I want other moms that could use the expertise, could use the reports that you and Barry write to show a pattern of behavior, to understand their case might be a domestic violence case. And to hire you if they can afford to, or if hopefully someday we'll have f- uh some nonprofits that can fund moms in this situation because so many of us are at a financial disadvantage. We can't hire and afford experts, but hire you as an expert or Barry as an expert to come and testify to educate the judge, which really does require, moms having either legal consultations or a lawyer on board. So I just want to jump into what you offer. I loved your open letter to the family courts. That was when you read the truth, it sets you free, right? It's like,
Yes.
yes, this is exact somebody knows what's going on and knows the truth. It's very validating and, it's satisfying in a way. So, I want to talk a little bit more about what you offer and, for moms. So you are also on Barry Goldstein's services website. That's how I found you after having several meetings with Barry and then meeting with you. You're on the same train of thought. You've read the latest research. You've got you know what's happening out in family courts and you can testify as an expert witness. And so I, highly recommend their services and at least reaching out and seeing what they could do for you, whether it's just a consultation so that you can see if it's possible, and or talking with them privately. I'm sure you have other videos and resources that they can watch. Is there anything particular from your work that you want to direct them to first? Is it read that open letter first?
That would be helpful, particularly if they are looking for a lawyer or they are in a situation where their current lawyer is just not getting it. Nothing infuriates me more than when I talk with mothers who have spent so much money on lawyers and legal um, advice that is not good in their situations. It's really alarming to me that there's so many lawyers out there that will take these cases and they don't understand the dynamics of domestic violence, and they're doing this case more harm than good. And so this letter was really about helping lawyers understand that if you're going to take a case that involves any alleged domestic violence or child abuse, then you really need to be sure as a lawyer that you're prepared to take it on and that you understand the nuances and the dynamics of how family court is navigating these cases and how they're getting it wrong. And so that was really the intent of the article, but it's helpful for the moms to read it just to kind of see if they're looking for a lawyer, what they might want to look out for.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you giving us your expertise for an hour. This was informative, educational, and I'm so thankful that you do the work on behalf of all the moms out there that have suffered this, are going through it, are still suffering, who will suffer this. Thank you for the work that you do. I know how hard it is. I remember doing like free sessions for a year or two and burning out on the, what do they call it, secondary trauma of all the stories I heard of family court failures. Thank you for doing this work. Please keep doing this work. And know that we are so grateful for the work that you are willing to do, and to show up for the moms and show up for the children. Because when you show up in a courtroom or you write one of these patterns of abuse reports, the children are getting a voice, they're getting maybe protections, they're getting a chance at being protected by whoever the protective parent is. And in my case, it's I help moms. So thank you. You and Barry are just like beautiful souls, and God sends from so keep doing this work, and we thank you for doing it. We thank you for your time in this hour, and I hope to have you on again. We'll come up with another topic, but this was general, just to have hope that there are professionals out there. We do know what's going on. We want to find ways to reverse and fix the mess or stop it from becoming a mess. And we want you to have hope that there's people out there that will be in your corner and understand what you're going through, and not doubt you when you say like this is what's happening. And so many people can't believe like I lost legal custody. They're like, how could that be? You're you're the PTG this and you're working in the school, like how can you lose custody? Well, there's tricks and tactics of a narcissist, and there's a custody battle in a family court that's not able to detect who the high conflict person is. And hopefully moms learn and how to not be part of that high conflict, and not do what the narcissist is doing or the abusive parent. Don't be reacting, learn to respond, and get the help and support of coaches. So thank you so much for being here, and I hope to connect with you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Grace. It was wonderful being here today.
Thank you for watching this presentation, How to Navigate a Custody Battle with a Narcissist. I'm Grace Wroldson, a author and strategy support coach for moms in custody battles with narcissists or forced to co-parent. My guest was Veronica York, a high conflict divorce coach and domestic violence and child abuse expert. We covered some topics, and we talk about the research being the key to unlocking the truth of these cases that are high conflict. I'm Grace Wroldson. You can come to my website and look at my other previous books. My background was loving an alcoholic, breaking free of chronic codependency, love addiction, and trauma bonds to heal fully, and then try to protect my child from narcissistic abuse. If you're a mom and you want to read my story, Get my tips, tools, and strategies. Start with co-parenting with a narcissist. 7 self-rules to stay sane. It's available at Amazon and for listen on Audible. There's an 8th bonus rule, and it's about staging a comeback. My second book, How to Fight a Narcissist in Family Court and Win, has my super smart strategies for success. My third is Co-Parenting with a Narcissist, Survival and Sanity Guide. And my fourth has all my latest skillful means teachings, how to survive a custody battle with a narcissist when the family courts force you to co-parent. These are available at Amazon. If you are ready to learn, I am ready to teach. Grab onto some of my survivor wisdom. Know that you're not alone, and be learning what you can to improve or at least better your conditions for yourself and your children. This is my website. You can click on just the co-parenting with a narcissist. The courts say we have to co-parent, and so that's the word I use, even though it's more like parallel parenting. But I'm all about using skillful means to attain peace and keeping our sanity and serenity. I have tools, resources, free blogs. This is my Navigate the Narcissist Co-Parenting Self-Study video course. When you're dealing with a narcissist, you need to do these 3 things. 1, navigate the family court system. 2, navigate the drama of the narcissist. And 3, navigate your fears. And there's so much more to navigate in this. We got to navigate financial situations and issues. And I like to talk about how the narcissist has tricks, tactics, traps, and many more manipulations, but we have strategies, skills, and self-rules, and the ability to learn, adapt, change, navigate, overcome. We have some things that the narcissist doesn't have, and we can be really wise to know what the tricks, the tactics, traps are. I have a whole PDF of co-parenting abuse that gives you a list of all the things that was used against me, including gaslighting, flying monkeys, minions, and more. This is my website. You'll see all my blogs, all my latest blogs. Some are free, some have paid PDFs or videos you can watch. I really talk about getting a lawyer, at least legal consultations and legal advice for this. It can be really hard to navigate a family court battle, and it can be really empowering to get legal representation. So we had Veronica York. You can find her at her website, and she does have some resources under her resource tab, things that you can read and articles that she's written, like the family court's need for domestic violence experts. And she has some other ones like the open letter to family court that I particularly resonated with and applied to my case. So thank you for watching this. I want to share some more things that I offer to moms of my private groups, because it's important that you learn from a survivor, the family court failures, someone that's overcome them, experienced them, because it really does mean you need strategy. I really teach the skillful means approach and using self-rules. It's hard to set boundaries with a boundary crossing person and stay sane in the midst of insanity. So I do a lot of educating and just straight talking, using common sense, logic, and learning how to be reasonable in the eyes of the court. And Veronica talks about using the new research, the ACE, the Saunders, and the other studies that she mentioned. You can call in the experts in these cases, and you can try to get the judges to focus on the health and safety of the children and stay out of the narcissist drama and battles. And that's why I have my 11 video course. You can find her also on Barry Goldstein's website, because she works in partnership with Barry Goldstein. All of his stuff is very relevant. He's an attorney, and you can read about his story of how he went up to bat for a mom in a certain district, and it went poorly for him and the mom. So he had some mistakes to learn from, mistakes that we thought the justice system was on the side of protecting children and caring about children. And it unfortunately wasn't. So there are some of us out there doing the work to try to help children. So if you're co-parenting with a narcissist, I encourage you to start with book 1 to 2 to 3, and then to my 4th one, which is new, which has a 3-part survivor strategy, legal strategies, but Get the Lawyer Guide with the 20 question worksheet to be prepared for attorney interviews, maximize those consultations, get your burning legal questions answered by a lawyer. Then I have some how to communicate with a narcissist. It's really hard to communicate with someone and get your message across with someone who's determined to misunderstand you or to cause crazy making and circular conversations. So we have to apply some rules of how we will conduct ourselves and how we will stop reacting and just stick with our plan and our self rule. And I also have a comprehensive list of what to include in a court order, because the longer the list for you, the better, the more coverage of all the issues that could be presented with some different topics that you might not have thought about when your kids are young. That really be great to have a comprehensive plan, court order. And so you need to get a plan in place. And we personally have to make them because each situation is different, even though they're eerily similar. So how do we have hope? We have hope that we are experts out here working to try to better the system, try to educate the judges, try to educate the lawyers, out here to teach moms ways to use their lawyers and assert their rights, or to be smart about it and outmaneuver, out strategize the narcissist, or sidestep the narcissist, or neutralize him, de-escalate the conflict, and turn what I teach about turning the mind of the narcissist, that you're not the target of blame, that the judge and the courts who issue them consequences would be the one to be upset with. So I teach about that in strategy sessions with moms so they can have better co-parenting conditions. Doesn't my Get the Right Lawyer guide? You can buy it just by going to my blog. It's a $10 PDF. Read through it first. When you print them, those worksheets out, write in them, and be ready so that you don't get tongue-tied and twisted, and maybe you have a fear of authority figures and you just don't know how to interact with an attorney and what questions to ask. So if you're right to ask questions, and there's some questions in the 20 question worksheet in that guide. I have a blog that's also, I think, a PDF of the legal strategies that I used in a family court battle with a narcissist. There's 20. I had to use multiple strategies, switch strategies, zigzag my way through court, chip away at some things, delay on others. And so here's some that I use that you can think about, because you really need to articulate the strategy that you are using. I have another blog, which is also a PDF, also in my last book, How to Communicate with a Narcissist Using Skillful Means. And this worked for me. It may or may not work for you. And just keep in mind, it took me a year to get better conditions by planting these seeds of cooperation and stuff to stop the hate that was going back and forth, being passed back and forth, and to not be a threat, direct threat to the narcissist, where I was being targeted with co-parenting abuse. Here's my 5 factors that made the narcissist stop in my case. As I told you, I consulted with Barry Goldstein years ago. He told me those 3 things: accountability, monitoring, and consequences are needed on repeat with the narcissist, which is one of my strategies, is to back up into the microscope of the family court to have us under view. But if you're dealing with a narcissist and co-parenting abuse, that's what I call it, but it's post-separation abuse, abuse by proxy, using like the legal system to abuse the victim or the target of blame. This blog can help. So think about that. Think about what strategies and skills and rules you've set for yourself while they're doing their tricks and tactics and traps and their manipulations. And watch my 11 video course to get the basics. It can really help you just ground you in some sanity, some wisdom, some knowledge, so you're not reacting and destabilized. I always tell moms the number one way a narcissist wins is to emotionally destabilize the target. And it is very effective. And at one point, it worked on me. But the thing is, we can learn our lessons. We can heal from narcissistic abuse. We can outgrow the narcissist and the petty drama. We can actually come out smarter and stronger than before. So I encourage you to learn. Knowledge is power. If you want to join one of my private groups, I have this one on Facebook, because together we are stronger. I give tidbits of wisdom and posts. Always say learn all you can, because There's other people out there teaching, and something will resonate with you. And it's better to use wisdom when you are going through something like this. And wisdom is knowledge plus experience. That's how we get our wisdom. This is one of my newer blogs, 25 Key Phrases to Neutralize the Narcissist when Co-Parenting in Our High Conflict Custody Battle. If you're forced to co-parent with a narcissist, you may want to say certain things. These are the ones that worked for me, and I ended up with more than 50% of the time, maybe 85 now, and getting a large amount in child support that I wasn't asking for, that the judge ordered, and getting co-parenting situations that were in my best interest, like having the YMCA child transfer for exchanges for 4 years. I also got court-ordered parenting calls, and my child got her therapist ordered. There's a lot that I did using the courts, and there's a lot that I did behind the scenes to appear as the more reasonable party and not be lumped in as the high conflict case, that I'm the high conflict. I didn't want to be identified as a high conflict party. I wanted to make sure that I was not labeled that in the judge's mind. So I encourage you to check out Barry's work, check out Veronica's work, see what they have to offer you, maybe do a consultation, and remember to have hope. There are those of us out there working on this tirelessly around the clock, probably end up writing another book full of other moms' stories of success so that you can get a wide variety of how moms navigated and got through the family court and how their children overcame it too, and are going on to not only survive it, but on to thrive and getting out of the narcissist clutches, because the hope is our children grow up. They are not going backwards in age. They are becoming adults, and they're stepping into their rights, even if we lose ours. And that is our hope. Our children will grow up and outgrow this. And if we maintain peace and sanity, we can pass that on to them, and they can be inspired by us. So thank you so much for watching. Check out the links below to find my Navigate course and be walked through some of my basics. And I look forward to seeing you in another video. Remember to like and subscribe.